Look, it definitely doesn't sleep. I think in Australia, at least in Perth, right, everything closes by like 2 a.m.
Yeah, okay, that's like most places here.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah. And then so like the idea that like, oh yeah, we can just keep going. Like, where do we go after? I'm like, huh, home? Yeah.
Well, it's nice to know the driving issues here. Like, I feel like in big cities, they close at 2 because they don't want people drinking till 4 and then getting in a car afterwards, you
Yeah.
know? But here, no one gets in the car. So I feel like they don't care. They're like, yeah, drink as long as you want, you know, like make the bars all the money.
It does
you know?
make sense. I will say, I don't think that New York is the city that doesn't sleep. I feel like New York sleeps between the hours of like 4 to 10 a.m. Miami is the city that doesn't sleep. That,
Probably true.
yeah.
Well, no one works in Miami. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been in Miami where someone has like a real job. You know, it's like,
Jen?
oh yeah, Jen works for us. But for the most part, it's like everyone has a really nice car, yet you have no idea what they do for a living. So, yeah, don't ask. Exactly. Yeah.
Welcome to the weekly edition of the Pain Points of Wealth podcast, the podcast that addresses all the pain points that come along with creating, growing, and sustaining your wealth. Hosted by the family wealth experts of Payne Capital Management, Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. Please send us any questions or comments you may have to questions@paynecm.com. And please enjoy this week's episode.
Both my parents are from Serbia. They immigrated during the 90s, during the Yugoslav war. And so like I grew up in like this little Aussie Serb community around there. And so like they were middle class, but like they were just like, hey, you know what, just like work hard. You know, they wanted me to be a doctor, to just like, they very much pushed academics on me because that's like what they knew.
Sure.
And then I kind of rebelled against that. And so when I was 15, 16, the first job I ever had was creating content. So I ran meme pages and I ended up like amassing 15 million followers.
Wow, what's meme pages? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. So like, you know, accounts, like I ran different film and television accounts where I would just like make memes. So like,
Like,
yeah,
on Instagram or
Instagram,
okay.
Facebook, Twitter,
Yeah.
everything like that. And I remember, telling my parents, I was like, hey, like I just got a job. It's like 16, 17. I just got a job where I'm getting paid to like make memes, and they just couldn't comprehend that. And my dad, I remember telling me, he was like, I do not believe you until you show me paycheck. And then I did.
How much was the paycheck?
It was like $800. No, yeah.
Yeah, so It was like, that was a real paycheck for
Yeah.
a 15, 16-year-old.
Exactly. And it was great. And then I think like at that point, that's when my parents started being like, oh, I think he'll be okay. Like, just like let him do what he wants to do.
So what about your parents? Did they have the same kind of entrepreneurial spirit that you have, or what did they do when they first came to Australia?
They definitely did. My dad studied his PhD in electrical engineering here. And my mum, she became an English as a second language teacher. So they just had to like make their way here. I think it's just one of those things when you land in a country where you don't even like speak the language. Luckily, my mum learned English like in university, but it's just like do whatever you can. I feel like, you know, it's the same in New York, right? Like what happens when an immigrant come here? Usually they'll start like a business, or something like
Yes.
that. That's why you have so many incredible restaurants here, because it's just the one thing you're like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just gonna get going.
What do you think? You said you had a rebellious streak. Like, what do you think it was about your nature that was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to do something that's more like risk taking and maybe riskier.
I think it was because my parents were very like pushy on me to do stuff that I like pushed back against it. That's like the best way to do it. I think when I went to university, I remember meeting a friend, Matt, who just like opened my eyes into the world of like tech and entrepreneurship. He was like, this is basically the only industry where you have just like unlimited upside potential, because every career you go into, like theoretically, like there is a ceiling to how much you can earn. Whereas this is like the only one where you can just make as much money as you possibly can. And so I was like, oh, this sounds cool.
And how did you get like 15 million users on these pages? Like, what was it that you figured out or you hacked that was like you were able to really make a business out of it?
So it was all just different growth hacks, different channels. I know prior to our recording, we were saying that you advertise a lot on radio, which is like finding like market channel fit, so where your users are actually like meeting them where they are. So one thing like back in the day was that Facebook was really popular amongst like Gen Zs, and so it was like, how could we like hack Facebook to grow a page from like 0 to like 200,000 in a few weeks. So what I realized at the time was people were uploading full episodes of like different TV shows and movies onto Facebook. Obviously, it was totally illegal and completely copyrighted. But for instance, we don't have like Comedy Central in Australia. And so like Rick and Morty was very big at the time. And so it was very hard to like watch it. And so I just managed to like torrent it, download it and then re-upload it to Facebook. And then in the span of 6 weeks grew this Rick and Morty page to 200,000 followers because everybody would follow for like the weekly drop, and then drop like other memes. So it was just like a whole bunch of figuring out like what actually people wanted.
And then would you generate advertising revenue from all the page views? Is that how you would actually like make money from doing that?
Yeah, so I worked for Stephen Bartlett's first company. He's the founder of Diary of a CEO. And yeah, his first company was a digital marketing agency. And so their idea was like they would go to all of these like production studios and be like, whatever show you have, we'll take clips from it. So like one of them was the BBC, and they were promoting David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2 documentary. And so my job was to take clips from it, upload it to all of our pages, make them go viral, because in the hopes that people would like see the clips and then maybe like they would think subconsciously, oh, I'll go like watch this later in the week. And so like after that campaign, there were like 2 million extra TV viewers once it was complete.
Wow. So it really converted.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So after that, you then continued into the startup world.
Yes.
So what was your next step, and like what made you continue down this path of the startups?
So I went to university. My parents were like, you have to do university. That was like the one thing that they were like, we are not.
Even with those $800 checks coming in.
Yeah, they were like, this is non-negotiable. So I went into uni, and there I really got into just like the event scene because there were so many events happening on campus. We had a lot of clubs and societies, and so I got really involved. Ended up like heading a couple of clubs and societies, and so I just love throwing events, and so I started getting obsessed with this idea that like Facebook events was dying, because like all the freshmen were starting to just use Instagram and Snapchat, and like they had no idea about what Facebook was. And I was like, why don't Instagram and Snapchat have an events app in them? And then I was like, I'll just go build it. And so that was my first startup. It was called Invited. And the idea was to be able to create events and invite your friends across any social media platform. So a competitor to Partiful to Facebook events.
So basically at that time, like, did you actually code it yourself or you hire people to code it? Like, because AI at that point didn't exist, like just code this for me. How did you develop it? Like, where did the skills come from? Or did you like outsource that?
So I ended up chatting with my ex-girlfriend and I was like, I need a technical co-founder. And she was like, oh, I've got a friend in mind. He does like data science and whatnot. His name was Jordan. And so, yeah, we started the company together through that. And so I think like in entrepreneurship at the end of the day, you got to really know what your skill set is and isn't. Mine is not technical. I'm very much like marketing, distribution focused. And so it's just like solving one problem after another.
Nice. And was it a successful business? Did it blow up or?
Yeah. So we ended up raising around $500,000, launched it across
in
Australia.
College?
Yeah.
Wow.
Launched it across Australia, and then in a few US college campuses. So that's where I got like my exposure to just like coming to America, and I fell in love with the country. And it unfortunately did not take off because Australia is not a very dense place. There's only 25 million people compared to like nearly 400 million in America. So it's very hard to get like a lot of people using your app at once. And so we ended up shutting it down. We weren't making any revenue. You know, it was very much like a consumer social media app. And I think that was like my biggest learning, which is like the next time I start something, I just want to be making money from the get-go. So that like I don't have to go through the experience of having to shut down a business.
Right, because you built all this infrastructure, you built it up, but there was no revenue at the end of the day. But I assume you threw some really good parties.
Yeah, our launch party was on a plane. It was awesome. That was sick because
You gotta tell us about this.
Yeah, so you know, sleepy old Perth. I'm like, I have this idea. Like, I want to throw a party on a plane. I don't think it's like even possible, but I just Google like a plane to hire in Perth, and I think I'm on like the 3rd or 4th page of Google, and I read this news article of these like 2 farmers who just have an obsession with like planes, and they bought a decommissioned 737 and they were turning it into an Airbnb, and it was like this niche local newspaper. So I ended up like calling up the editor and I was like, do you know like what their phone number is? And I got their phone number and I called them and I was like, hey, I have an idea. I want to throw a party on the plane that you're like renovating right now. And they're like, sure, let's do it. It was like the perfect time.
This is on the ground or somebody was flying it?
This was on the ground.
Okay, that feels safer.
Yeah,
I know, I was
but we
imagining
had some
here.
insane drone footage. I mean, I'll have to show you like
I'll have
after.
to get some drone footage.
But it was inside the plane, outside. It was so cool.
There are actually companies that like have like sets built that look like private jets, so influencers could come in and make their videos.
Classic.
It's kind of like the same thing.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that how you ended up in the USA? Just because you said Australia is not that dense, it was just a big. You were vying for a bigger audience, I think.
Yeah, very much so. And I think after coming to the US, I was like, I really want to be here. I think it's one of those places where, like, especially in tech, it's the hub and the center of the world. And so, like, I got that opportunity 2 years ago to move over with an Australian New Zealand startup that was launching in New York. And so my job was to launch it here, and that was a lot of fun.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, what is the, like, if you're in Perth, what's the entrepreneurial environment like? Like, is there a big startup scene there? Or were you kind of like a fish out of water? Was it actually odd that you had all these entrepreneurial aspirations in a place where maybe it's not the most common thing?
Definitely the latter. So being a fish out of water. Perth isn't really a tech hub. It is a mining and real estate city. The best way to think about it, it's almost like the Texas of Australia in a lot of ways, because it's all about natural resources. You know, my sister and her husband work in oil and gas and mining. So it's, and so Sydney and Melbourne are like where in Australia you get the tech hub. And so there's been a lot of Perth startups. So for instance, Canva is from Perth. But they moved over to Sydney, and so they're now like headquartered in Sydney, and they've got offices in SF and New York. And so yeah, it's just one of those things where like typically you're gonna have to move if you really want to make it.
Yeah. So you went to Sydney first, and then with the startup, or how did that all transpire?
I thought I was going to go to Sydney first, but I ended up just going straight to New York. So basically this job came up for this New York launcher position, and within 6 weeks I moved. So it was very fast. That was a very interesting conversation to have, with my girlfriend and with my parents, and I was like, well, I'm moving.
Take care and brush your hair.
Yeah.
Hey, hope you're enjoying the most recent episode of the Payne Points of Wealth podcast. Everything you hear on this podcast, along with some due diligence of your own, can help you get ahead financially literally at any stage of your journey. But if you want a more hands-on approach and you saved over $1 million for your retirement, Bob, Chris, Courtney, and I will run for you our total financial master plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. Simply go to www.paynecm.com/financial plan or click the link below to see if you qualify for a free financial review. Were you nervous to move to New York, or was it like you knew this was going to be a place for you? Like you just had it in your feeling like this is going to be the spot. Had you been to New York before?
I had been to New York when I was 11 years old, so I didn't really like remember it too much. But I was just like, look, I'm a very optimistic person, so I was like, well, this move is going to be great. Like regardless, it's whatever I make of it. I'm very extroverted, and it turns out New York is a city full of extroverts.
I like you're definitely a risk taker, but an optimist. Like you're always looking at the positive side of taking risks, not any of the negative side of taking risks, which I think puts you in a really good position, actually.
I think you have to be. I definitely describe myself as a techno optimist, which just means like, technology is probably going to make humanity better, by and large. And so it's just like, if I can be in that scene, then I'll probably be making hopefully a positive impact.
Yeah. So I guess with the organization that you're running right now, Migrate Mate, you started that as kind of a necessity, right? Was this because of your struggles with trying to find a visa in the US? I mean, how did that all transpire?
Exactly. So
came over as an employee.
Yes. Came over as an employee. 6 months in, I was laid off. And as someone on a visa, when you get laid off, you have 60 to 90 days to find a new job or get kicked out of the country and deported.
No pressure.
And so, no pressure at all. And so when I went through that process, it was so stressful. I couldn't believe that there was nothing that actually helped people who were on visas find jobs that sponsored visas. I was lucky because with the last few days, I ended up securing a job at a startup. But I was like, there must be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that go through this or will go through this. And so the idea of Migrate Mate really stemmed from that. And so I ended up, about 9 months later, starting it with my best mate from Perth, Dylan. I called him up because he was a technical engineer.
Was he here or was he in Perth?
He was in London, of all
okay.
places. Yeah, so he had moved like 6 months before to London. So we were on similar time zones, which was like really helpful. And I was like, I've got this idea. Like, I think it'll work. I pitched it to him. He was like, yep, great, let's do it. And so, yeah, we started building the first version of Migrant Mate, which was this database helping people find companies that had sponsored visas. And then, you know, we got a lot of people interested in it. People started paying $20-$25 to use it. And so we ended up selling it to about 7,000 people before we ended pivoting into what we are now, which is a jobs board. So it's got live jobs that sponsor visas.
And how do you find like the companies? I mean, are you working with companies to put their jobs on your profile? Or are you guys sourcing them, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, so we built tech to source, to actually go through 6 million jobs in America multiple times per day, verify that they're still active, and look at their job description and company visa history to determine through an algorithm if this role at this company actually sponsors a visa. So there's about 6 million open jobs in the US at any given time. Okay. And right now we have about between 600 to 700,000 jobs per day.
Of the ones that are actually, I guess, visa friendly.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's all over the US. So that's not just New York based.
Correct. All over. In every state.
So what, like, coming to New York, I mean, it's amazing. So you like basically got laid off from your job. You got another job. Was it easy to start your own business in New York City as an immigrant, someone who could like be, you know, deported at any moment here, who needed a job? Like how hard was it to have a startup here? Or, you know, and this is like probably like a very recent thing. So
I will say New York being so expensive pushed us to just like grow as fast as we could, because I think like one of the big things for me was like I need to pay rent, otherwise I'm gonna be homeless, and so it was like this in like when we were bootstrapping for the first like 6 months before we raised, we were just like every single day, how can we get like and the next user and the next one, and so we're just figuring out more and more growth hacks. It first started with a WhatsApp group, then it was like TikTok, then it moved into Instagram and Facebook and ads and everything like that. And so it was like a constant innovation cycle, purely based on pressure to be able to pay my next rent.
So it all came down to your ability to market really well to a very, very niche group of people.
Correct.
Yeah. What was one of the best advertisements you did early on that just like crushed it and you were able to get like a lot of exposure with?
Yes, it was when we made our first TikTok video. So my friend Joe, I had, you know, pitched him the idea. He was like, I love it, let's do it. He was a big like TikToker. So he posted a video, got like 100,000 views, and we got like 100 sales from it.
What was the video?
The video was just him being like, if you want a H1B in America, listen up. Something like that. It was just like a very simple hook, and then it just explained like what Migrant Mate was. And then people from Australia, Europe, even in America bought it because there's a lot of international students here. And so this like really opened the market, because at first I thought I was making it for Australians, because our very first users were all Aussies, but that was like when it became international and we started to realize like, oh, this is a much bigger market than what we think.
Have you found, so do you do a lot on TikTok versus Instagram? Because I know there is a lot of talk of how the TikTok algorithm is just figured out. I mean, you can just reach a lot more people through it, but it's getting bought, or probably bought here in the US outside of China, but they're probably going to redo the algorithm, which I would think changes the whole game. Like that's the whole thing with TikTok. Like, are you actually finding, is there a much better marketing opportunity in TikTok than there is in Instagram?
There's actually a very big difference in the way that people use each platform. So TikTok is very good for brand awareness, but not very good for conversions, like particularly for like SaaS products. I think TikTok Shop is now becoming a lot better for conversions, but Instagram's superiority is the fact that people will buy from Instagram. If they see something on there or they see an ad, they will buy, where it's a lot rarer on TikTok. And so we found
people are more skeptical about TikTok because of China and stuff like that? Or what do you think the reason is?
I think it's just user behavior. Like, why do you use TikTok versus Instagram? So like when you use TikTok, you're purely using it for like entertainment. Like if you think about it, right, it's much more similar to like a TV. So like you're going to see ads on TV, but they're not going to make you buy in the moment because you're there to be entertained. But when you're on Instagram, you're there to like see your friends. What are they up to? Like maybe then you'll also get entertained through reels and like different non-friend pages is the way to describe it. But the psychology of using Facebook and the psychology of using Instagram is very heavily weighted towards purchasing.
It makes sense. Yeah, because I don't buy anything. Your TikTok, you're right. It's purely, I'll skip past the ad as quick as possible because you're just not in that mode. It's like a psychological thing for sure. I totally get that. Yeah. I mean, so another question for you is like, you said with entrepreneurship, the thing you like about tech is like you can make, infinite amount of money, right? There's no ceiling to how much you can make. It's like the real independence. What's your view about financial independence now? Like you're in your second startup, you're only 26 years old. What is your goal, I guess, financially speaking? Like, is financial independence important to you? Like, what are your viewpoint of money now that you're starting to build a business, your second business?
Definitely. It's very important to me. I think like what I started to realize is the most important thing is to have disposable income. I think that's actually like the way to achieve independence. I've seen far too much like my friends who do become successful, but then there's lifestyle creep, and they have no savings, right? And so you live paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
And so I think like the real independence that you can gain is like, what is the delta between like your expenses versus like just how much you save? And so that for me, it becomes this thing of like, it plateaus. So like, if you make over, I don't know, 100 grand a year, and especially like in New York, if you're making over, 120, 130, you can live a pretty good life and you can save like money. But
how do you do it?
How do you do it? Yeah, you just got to find great deals. But I think what also tends to happen is then like if people scale and their, salaries get above 200K, $500,000, maybe all of a sudden they're buying a lot more things and they're going into a lot more debt. And it's like, okay, great. You're actually not that financially independent. You've got a lot nicer stuff, but could you just go on a holiday? Probably not.
We see this all the time in our industry. Yeah. Yeah. It's always like the people who have the flashiest cars usually have like the least amount of money, which is so funny. But when you think about saving, so are you just like putting money aside into a savings account? Do you invest your money? Like, how do you think about that?
So this is the one great thing about Australia is we have a thing called super. It's superannuation. And so like 10% or just a little bit more than 10% of your income goes into superannuation, which is like effectively your retirement fund.
Yeah.
So they're like basically phasing out pensions so that like you save at least 10% of all of your income. And so like, because I lived in Australia and like went through that, I was like, oh, it probably makes sense just to keep at least 10% of my wealth like stored away. And so I've created a lot of automations. So I use Robinhood. So just 10% of my salary just goes straight into the stock market and into my portfolio. And I just try not to touch it. Like the way that I view that money is like, I cannot touch that money. And like, I'm not going to touch it. It's just going to be there for the long term. And then at the same time, I've got a savings account as well. And so a portion of my salary goes into my savings account. And so I've got a checkings account, and that checkings account is always super low, which then keeps me in this scarcity mindset, which is like, oh, I'm not sure if I can like actually afford this. We don't have credit. Like people don't use credit cards in Australia. Like credit cards are just like not really a thing.
Yes.
And so like I only use one here because I know I need to get a credit score, but it stresses me out. And that like keeps me in a way to actually like save money.
We're so impressed with your financial discipline. I can tell you right now. Courtney's just hoping that all your savings isn't going into crypto and Robinhood. But I guess my question too is it's a really good point. Like, the mentality about savings and lifestyle, how different is it in Australia versus here in the US?
I think in Australia, it's much more of a scarcity mindset, and also people tend to save a lot more money because people in Australia want to buy a home. That's like the goal. Whereas in America, I think a lot of people want to put their money into productive assets. So there is a big debate in Australia right now about like, hey, there's not much money flowing, for instance, into the stock market or into tech compared to, say, America, because everyone's just trying to buy a home. And for some reason in Australia, like if you buy a home, it's like an infinite money glitch because home prices only go up. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case long term, but it's very much a thing right now where everybody is trying to save for a home. So you've got a very high savings rate because everyone's just trying to save for a home.
And do you find, is that Australia in general, or like, do you think having immigrant parents also changes that at all?
Yes, definitely having immigrant parents. However, I personally like don't really want to save for a home because I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to be in a few years' time, if you know what I mean. So I'm not yet ready to like think about settling down. But yeah, immigrant parents, they're the only goal in life, own land. That's it. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you have that balance of like, I need fiscal discipline, but as an entrepreneur, you need to take risk the proverbial, you got to spend money to make money if you're really going to get ahead in a big way. And I feel like you kind of straddled that line pretty well, which is probably more of a, I would say, I'd argue maybe more of an American mentality than an Australian mentality.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think I've become a lot more capitalistic since moving here.
That's what we do well, man.
Yeah.
On that same token, I know a lot of people that I know that are entrepreneurs. Like, it's very difficult for them to take any of their profits and save it. They're usually always trying to put it back in the business. Is that difficult for you?
Yeah, I think I had to learn this through my like first startup, which is like you should just pay yourself enough where you can live and like not have to stress. Like you can afford food, you can afford rent. Like I can still do the things that I enjoy, but I'm not like just overspending. Right. Yeah, that's probably like the biggest learning, because at the end of the day, if you're so focused on putting your money back into your business, I think your life is going to fall apart on the outside, whether it's relationships or health or anything like that. So I like to think about it, especially now that like we've raised a few $1 million. We've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, like this salary, like we've earned it, like we are working. But then with the rest of the money that isn't like salary based, it's like, how can like we best use that and be as efficient with our capital as possible.
And what is your process for raising the capital? Like, who are you going to and how are you finding the investors?
VC funds. So just as I'm not sure if you know too much about like the startup landscape, but you just go straight to VC funds, typically get intros from other founders or like other investors and just pitch 100 different VCs and one will invest.
Amazing. That sounds like such a New York thing.
Yeah.
Like, so tell me about, we talked about this off camera, but do you think, people talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, especially in New York, in America, like, do you think it's alive and well today? Like it's always been? Do you feel like this is an epicenter for entrepreneurship as a young entrepreneur?
100%. I feel like so many of my friends have moved to New York from SF, from LA, from Australia. Very interesting. I think it's mainly because New York is becoming this place where like you get this great balance of like intensity, but being able to do literally anything that you could imagine. I love, for instance, music, and I think New York is like the capital of the world for it, because any band or any artist who comes through to do a North America tour always comes through New York. So like we're sport for choice, which just means that like in my downtime, I get to do all the things like I'm actually passionate about, but at the same time, then I can just lock back in to work.
Yeah, no, it's great. You're right. You get the mix of like culture, art, along with, it's like a very business oriented place, but you're right. It's a mix of all those things, which is a really cool way to look at it. I'm curious, like, okay, you come here, you have no connections, you're building a startup, and like, how did you get to your first VC fund to get cash? Like to me, that's remarkable. And you're only 26.
Thank you. So it really all came down to just going out with people. So when I first moved here, I joined this Aussie gym. It was a high rocks gym, it was 30% Australians, 70% Americans. I met a lot of friends that way. And then, you end up going out with them and you meet their friends and whatnot. And so like my network expanded very quickly through that. And so just like putting myself out there. And then it wasn't until like a year and a half later when like all those friends that I had made actually like became really helpful in terms of raising money, because I ended up becoming close friends with this guy called Rory. Rory has now raised, tens of millions of dollars from the likes of like Google Ventures. And then he was like, oh, let me introduce you to like our pre-seed investors. And so he did, and they were the ones that ended up investing. Clearly if they like Rory, who's an Australian from Perth working in tech, they'll probably like Mihailo, who's also an Australian in tech coming from Perth. And yeah, it was really fortunate that way. I think it's just one of those things for any entrepreneur. The best thing that you can do is actually make friends. I really think networking is an overrated word. All it really means is just like have genuine friendships.
It's kind of true, because when I started my business here in New York, I was working for a big firm, and an Aussie who I partied with mentioned that he had space in the back of his building, his startup. And when I needed a place for our startup, we got to lease like for $1,000 a month the back of his startup space. Just because we were out drinking beers together. And then, at one point, like we think we were drunk in the night, he said, yeah, you can lease space for me. And then of course, like weeks later, I make the phone call You mentioned that space in the back. He's like, yeah, you can have it. So it's totally true about New York.
Yeah, see, that's how it works. Just drink beers with people,
Especially
and the best
Aussies.
business. Yeah, and business
Yeah, that's
deals will
actually been
happen.
our marketing strategy. We just get people drunk and then bring them in as clients. It works really well.
I love it. Yeah, best strategy.
But I mean, in terms of going to see these VCs, I mean, it's definitely, I got to think it's a numbers game. So, I mean, how many of these pitches did you do before you got your first hit?
Yeah, I think it was around like 50 or 60. So yeah, it's very much like a numbers game. I think what's not really talked about that much is like investor founder fit. So when we met our current like lead investors, like it was almost immediate. Like we knew that they were going to be great because of like the energy on call, like the questions that they were asking, how like we bounced off each other. And so I think you just need, it's almost like dating. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You'll go on a lot of first dates, but you will remember that those one or two people who like really stood out, and hopefully they'll become like your long-term partners.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Like when you knew, like what was it about it that particular VC? You don't have to mention any names. Like what was it that you felt like, okay, this is right. I know this is working. I mean, can you describe that at all?
Yeah. So we hopped on call, and immediately like 100% energy, on the call. Like I'm very extroverted, as you can probably tell.
You didn't say no to our interview, and we're strangers.
Yeah, got a lot of energy myself, and so just like having that match, I was like, oh, this is great. Like this is someone who I would actually like want to hang out with outside of work. And I think like that's a really like good way of looking at it. And then it's just like the quality of the questions, because I think like at the end of the day, we're in the immigration space. And so I was so used to like VCs being like, oh, I just like not sure how big like the immigration space is. Whereas she was just like, no, well, I know it's a huge market, it's a human movement. And so it was way less about like convincing around like, is the market big enough? But it's like, how are you actually like executing? How are you thinking about things? And so it's, just a difference in conversation.
It's an interesting time right now because immigration is very like, it's in the headlines right now. It's become a very political conversation. Like, how has that changed your business? Is that a positive or a negative, or like, how are you having to change things because of that?
There's been both positives and negatives. So when the 100K H1B fee came about, less people were believing that they could actually get jobs. And so like we saw a reduction in demand of people actually like searching for jobs. Now, with recent news, that 100K fee seems to not be affecting anyone who's already in the US on a visa, which is a lot of our audience actually. Like the majority of our audience are people already in the US on visas. And so like now that's totally changed things. But the really good part about like how politicized immigration has gotten is how good it is for marketing. Because like we now totally changed our like marketing strategy to really be focused on being the authority in the space. We'll give news updates about immigration. On top of that, like we are, I guess, like the rebellion, if you look at it, like where so many people are like anti-immigration, we're very pro-immigration.
Sure.
And so just like having that stance and, at least aligns a lot of people with like what we're doing. Ultimately, our customers are immigrants, so they're probably going to like believe in, in us, which just helps us actually build a stronger community.
What's interesting too is, a lot of the rhetoric right now is like very anti-immigrant. Ironically, it's a country built on immigrants. I mean, do you feel like today the immigrant's American dream is still alive and well, like it's always been, or do you think it's more stunted now because of maybe some of the newer policies that are coming out of our government?
I think honestly it's pretty alive and well. Like at the end of the day, not a lot of my friends are like moving home, and most of the people who are already here, they're not being like, oh, all these policies are bad, I want to go home. They're like, how can I stay?
Yes.
And so I think like taking that mentality, like my parents immigrated to Australia because of a war. And so like their mentality wasn't, they were like, we don't care about the political climate of Australia. They were just like, we want to escape the war, and like live a better
simpler
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's the lesser of two evils, if that makes sense. And so, at the end of the day, people are always going to want to immigrate, usually like to move upwards in life. I think America is the greatest country on earth in terms of just having the opportunity to make something of yourself, and it doesn't matter who's in politics.
Why is that? I mean, what do you think the difference is here in terms of the mobility, especially as an entrepreneur?
It's the individualism that is so prevalent in American culture. The fact is, Australia is much more homogenous. So we have this thing called like tall poppy syndrome, which is that like if you are successful, people try and cut you down. Like they will not celebrate like your wins as much as they do in America. And I think like just that culture lends itself to being like, I believe in myself, therefore I can be the best version of myself.
And you are tall. For those who are at home, you're sitting down, you're at least like 6'3", 6'4".
I am.
Yeah, there you go. So
Yeah, I'm
symbolically.
I'm curious, why did your parents pick Australia of all the places?
I asked my parents this the other day, and it was a really funny reason. So US and UK, they couldn't get visas for. And so it came down to Canada versus Australia. My mum was just like, I just want to move to like an English speaking country. Again, predominantly because like there was more opportunity.
Yes.
And so she was like, oh, Canada's too cold. We're going to Australia. That was the actual rationale.
That makes
Good
sense.
rationale, actually. I like that. Yeah.
Canada's definitely cold.
Yeah.
So, and that is interesting. So they were looking to go to different countries and they could not get into the US. So they looked at Canada or Australia.
Yep.
I assume it's still like that today. I mean, every different country is going to have a very different immigration process. I know you actually mentioned before we started here that you guys are looking to eventually expand outside of the US. So how much are you guys working on, like what countries are next and how complicated does that get with all of these different countries and all of their different immigration policies, especially as they're changing so rapidly right now?
Yeah, so immigration is a hot topic and it's very hyper localized. So it takes a lot of just learning the law of the lands. I think the good thing though is that typically where people actually want to move to is fairly standard. So people just want upwards mobility in life. So if you think about it, you know, people want like the country that most people want to immigrate to is the US. You know, there's about 1 billion people in the world who want to leave their country and literally move somewhere.
1 billion people. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's huge. 1 in 8 people want to move, and we're the lucky ones, right? Just to be here.
100%.
And so when I look at like the rankings, it's like the US, it's the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, really all these like Western countries with very strong democratic beliefs, and just opportunities for people to succeed in life with rule of law. And so like when we're looking at where do we want to go to next, it's really these countries where like, you know, these 1 billion people from across the world actually want to go to.
I'm curious too, like being in the tech space, and obviously AI is the rage right now. Do you think it's overhyped, underhyped, and you know, where do you think AI goes in the future? Like, what's the biggest next thing when it comes to artificial intelligence?
I think it's a productivity tool more than anything.
100%,
and I think a lot of people like say, oh, it's not, or it's going to like kill humanity. Again, my techno optimist is more like, you know, people are just going to use it like they use the internet, like they use computers,
Totally.
and everyone is going to get a lot more efficient at what they do. You know, some jobs will be displaced, but in reality, they're just going to evolve. I think like when I look back on it, prior to like Microsoft Excel, there were people manually doing spreadsheets, which is just absolutely insane to think about, right? And I just think like in 20, 30 years time, we're going to think about like of some jobs and be like, it's absolutely insane people were doing it this way. Like maybe software engineering is going to be one of those jobs where like you could not imagine someone literally handwriting every line of code, because now it's just 100 times faster and way more efficient and better. And so like the job of a software engineer doesn't go away, but it changes into someone who can actually like manage what AI writes and ensure that it's actually correct and not full of any bugs.
And have you guys instituted AI in any of, I guess, your current company that you're running?
Yes. In Migrate Mate, we use AI all the time, not just to write the code and build the product, but also like within Migrate Mate itself. So the way that we actually find all the jobs, the way that we ensure that all the jobs actually do sponsor visas, all that back end is through AI. And so eventually we'll have, you know, AI tools and products like on site as well. But I think it's the real leverage of AI is the back end. So typically what people don't see.
No, it's a great point. I mean, in our business, we're seeing the same thing. Like a lot of the proposals we put together, a lot of it was manual, and now we have a software that someone else was manually taking the holdings from someone's statement, putting it in the computer, and essentially having it come out on the other end. Now, literally, AI does all of it for us. Yeah. Like that's wild.
Crazy.
It's like huge efficiency.
Yeah, and that's just what's going to happen at the end of the day. Who's going to pay for AI, right? It's going to be humans. So the tools that, like, if you just take a capitalistic mindset, the things that will succeed in AI are going to be the ones that add the most value to humans, not take it away.
You get your last question, and we're glad that you're a music buff. But we ask all our guests this question to end the show, and that is, if you could think of one song or album that you heard growing up that changed your entire perspective of the world, what song or album is that?
My sister was a musician and she introduced me to Queen.
Wow.
And so when I was a little kid, I just listened to basically every single Queen song on repeat for like years. And so I think like, yeah, Queen, Freddie Mercury himself, just as a person, totally like changed me. I think he's probably one of the most optimistic people in the world if you really think about it, and all the hardships that he went through. And so the impact of just Queen on my life, I would say, has been abundant.
What song?
Oh, We Are the Champions.
True optimist song. When you get up in the morning, eat your Wheaties and put that song on.
I just remember being in school, and it'd be a school carnival, whether it's a swim carnival or athletics carnival, and it doesn't matter. It's just lock in, we are the champions, hyping everybody up, and regardless of if we come first or last, it's just that spirit.
Thanks for listening to the Pain Points of Wealth. Hopefully you found the ideas discussed in this episode valuable and useful for your own financial journey. You can find out more about Bob, Ryan, and Chris's firm, Payne Capital Management, at bebullish.com or through the contact information found in the description of this episode in your podcast player or app. Join us next week for another episode of The Pain Points of Wealth, brought to you by Payne Capital Management. Information provided on today's show is provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Investment is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed.